Numbers chapters 25 and 26 today, and I have to start with a bit of a confession that I cheated slightly here because this is a second census. And I was thinking, why on earth are they bothering with another census? They've only just done one 5 minutes ago. I googled it and found out, no, apparently this is 38 years later. I'm not sure at what point it mentioned that 38 years had passed, and I've just missed it. But suffice to say, the Israelites are now coming to the end of their time in the desert, because it said earlier in the story, spoiler alert, that they were going to be there for 40 years, and they've been there for over 38 now. So God orders up another census, exactly the same basis as the last one in terms of we're measuring people, or men of a certain fighting age. We're again having this slight weird thing where it's 1 minute it's referring to the people as Israelites, the next it's referring to them as Israel. It just seems to be doing that a little bit. It's like we're being weaned onto something, but you can just keep an eye on it, seems otherwise fine. This next bit all takes place whilst the Israelites are camped in a city called Shittim. Great name. It talks about how some of the Israelite men are starting to get a little frisky with some of the local women, Moabites, I believe it was in general. You kind of think, so what? But then it does actually state that the acts they are engaging in, or the behaviour they're engaging in, is immoral. Not clear why, but yes, clearly this is bad anyway. We also, amongst this, we have the Israelites bowing down to some god called Baal, B-A-A-L. I think it's Baal, something like that. You can't help but roll your eyes at it. It's another ridiculous thing they're doing. I don't think there's any suggestion that Baal is supposed to be a real god. I think it's, he's as stupid as the golden calf thing that Aaron made 38 years ago, whenever it was. But sure enough, there's plenty of Israelites bowing down to this. God is obviously kind of miffed at this and decides that some of these people need to be put to death. Moses doesn't even try and argue with him, just goes and gives the order to some judges, I think it was, to go and have a load of these people killed. The next sentence in the book, after Moses has said, go forth and lay waste to all these Baal worshipping punks, is that there's an Israelite man along with a Midianite woman, Midianites still being descendants of Abraham, so kind of cousins, they're not like savages or anything like that, presumably, walks into the camp past Moses and Aaron's dead, isn't he? Past Moses and the rest of that party, and disappear into a tent together. Again, you kind of think, so what? But apparently this is not allowed. There's a chap called Phinehas now, who is Aaron's grandson, who doesn't like at all what this Israelite man is doing with lady presumably in the privacy of his own tent. So gets a spear, follows him into the tent, shoves it in his back, right through him, and into the woman's stomach as well. So he's got kind of like a sinner's kebab or something weird like that. This seemed deeply uncool to me, but it does seem God is quite pleased. So whatever matey boy and lady friend were doing, it wasn't good. And God decides that since Phinehas has shown such zeal, that is a really hard sentence, in showing zeal for the honour of God, he's going to give Phinehas the lasting covenant for the priesthood, because Aaron died recently. Well, I think it was recently. Aaron died anyway. So Phinehas is now going to be some sort of senior priest. I have some issues with this, but we'll come back to that. At the point Phinehas stabs this man and woman, it talks about the plague then ended, having killed 24,000 people. You're like, what plague? It's I don't know if it's a Tarantino-esque thing where there's been reference to a couple of plagues previously, but I thought that was quite some time ago, and there's nothing to suggest this plague has been ongoing and carrying on. It's sort of sloppy documenting, isn't it? It's just not even clear what plague we're talking about. Well, where did that come from? We didn't hear about the start of a plague. Now we're hearing about the end of a plague that ends on the button of this poor bloke and his lady friend getting stabbed in the back. Following the stabbage of matey boy in the tent and his Midianite lady friend, God turns to Moses and says, right, you better kill all the Midianites. I don't think based on what she did, whatever that was. But yeah, the Midianites are descendants of Abraham. Abraham was promised bajillions of children, more than grains of sand and stars in the sky. And God's now going to wipe out a subset of them for no obvious reason. The lack of information in this bit is quite frustrating. I mean, that's a bit of a theme for a lot of this, but yeah, it's so another society is going to get wiped out here apparently. Chapter 26 is then the next census, so it's very long, boring detail, just counting up the names and all the rest of it and how many people are there. The numbers for the Levites and the rest of the people, excluding the Levites, are very similar to what they were in the original census. Slightly proportionately higher for the Levites than for the rest of the people, which sort of suggests to me that maybe it's the Levites are better behaved, so they've been killed less. But then verse 63, I had to read this several times and even look it up elsewhere, which still wasn't particularly conclusive. But to me, it seems to be saying that there's 600,000-ish Israelites at this second census, and there were 600-ish thousand at the first one. And obviously, some will have died and some will have been replaced. But apparently, no, the whole lot, that's just completely new group of people. Everyone who was in the first census is dead, and this is a completely different set of 600,000 people who are presumably, therefore, under 38 years old. That would seem to tie up with what God said, that all the grumblers weren't going to see the promised land. But it was only the grumblers, so there should have been some people. So I wonder if this is a little bit of exaggeration. And all the grumblers are now dead, and it's everybody else, because clearly there's been another plague that's probably wiped them out. But either way, we've got similar number of Israelites, and most of those, presumably, are not the same Israelites who entered the desert in the first place. So they left Egypt with the promise of wonderful things, grumbled too much, died in the desert. So, yeah. A couple of brief points to come back to on that. The first one being the whole thing where Phineas goes, stabs a dude in the back and a lady while they're doing private things. And God likes this, so I don't know what the sin is. It doesn't say what the sin is. They could have been the worst people in the world, but that's not made clear, which is kind of, again, sort of sloppy documenting. But it does send kind of a message, doesn't it, that God will like it if someone does something wrong and you go and stick a big pointy stick in their back. It's it doesn't matter how many times you say love your neighbour as yourself, there's going to be some punk who will read things like that and just think, oh, I'm going to put people on sticks. So, same sort of problem as Leviticus, I think, in that sense, that it's just stuff that's not going to age very well and a little problematic. The other bit is coming back to this whole idea that you hear people talking about the God of the Old Testament being a different guy to the God of the New Testament because he's all vengeful and angry and but again, it's just they're doing their thing. They've been there 38 years. Yes, this is a whole new set of Israelites, apparently. I think probably not quite literally, but all those ones who've been born since then have been grown up with those parents and those teachings, and presumably God has been around and all the rest of it. Moses has been around. So they've got every reason to still believe, or to know even. They don't even have to believe, do they? They can just see it, that there's a God and all the rest of it. But they're still bowing down to this Baal guy. Baal, whatever. We're going to call him Baal. And, you get some sympathy for God. If we assume he's created this universe, he's put these people on it, he's said, I'm going to look after you. If you just do these little things that make some sense, be excellent to each other, I'll look after you, you'll have a nice time. Don't go and worship these fake gods and all the rest of it, because it's rude. And then they just keep going and doing it. I mean, you'd be so miffed, wouldn't you? Just like, what is wrong with these people? So, yes, he keeps setting fire to people and getting people eaten up by the ground and all the rest of it, which is deeply uncool by human standards, I realise that. But we've got to assume there's a different standard for God. So I think just judge it on he's fed up. It's not unreasonable that he's fed up, I think. I'd be fed up. You just think, how simple is it? I mean, he has literally done everything short of getting the glove puppets out to explain how you're supposed to do all this stuff, and it's pretty basic. So, yeah, does make you wonder, of the people who say it's a different guy, old and new, have they actually read it? Have they actually seen what he's had to put up with? And interesting idea anyway, but maybe we'll move on. And now we're coming to the end of the time for the Israelites being in the desert, so we'll move on and see what happens from here.